there are some things that I'd like to tie up as loose ends. Firstly, how do the tablets of fire that I have said were written by the original ones? And when I first became aware of it, I said that they wrote it in the future. We have now actually passed the date here on Earth that they would have written it, and those are you. So how is that possible? I believe that today we will get some answers. The tablets of fire, how do they tie in with the 384 principles of high magic? In the tablets of fire, there are a set of tablets within wheels, and there are the last 15 wheels that belong to the last 15 principles of high magic, came directly from the tablets of fire. They contain history of the original ones, of the origins of man, and the earth itself, and include also a few prophecies for the future. As I initially started to receive these wheels, I was wondering what exactly is the purpose of this kind of material inserted at the very end of the principles of high magic, and I have understood why. Because it provides power and energy. When one sees profound things that have never been seen before, or that have been forgotten in the far distant eons when life first began, long before any races had any kind of oral or history record of it. To see those things provide the power and the energy that is needed to make that big evolutionary leap from the stages of duality, including resurrection, to the high magic level of the immaculate white light. So today, I want to share with you the journey we have been on. What exactly have we accomplished? It is time to look back, because we have been focused on what is our next step, and we have looked forward at stages yet to come and started to prepare ourselves for them and define ourselves by them so that they could effortlessly be our new level of evolution. But in climbing up this mountain, we haven't looked back to see how far we've come. And I want to start my information by having us do that. We have seen far beyond the horizons of evolution seen by masters throughout the ages. Previously, unknown stages of evolution have revealed themselves to the holy ones amongst men. Life has birthed from its repetitive cycles around and around the walls of its incubation chamber. The masters of old couldn't see beyond the walls of the incubation chamber, as life was confined in it for eons, like a fetus developing in the womb. One cannot see outside that womb when you're part of the fetus. So masters simply could not see what you have seen. So we broke free from these cycles of evolution around and around the stages of development within duality. With this newfound freedom comes an uncharted journey into unknown territory. A few of the great lights among men have not only seen these stages, but you have forged ahead in previously unexplored stages of development. It takes courage to bravely leave behind familiar reference points found in the confines of a reality based on duality. It feels safe when one has known landmarks in your journey around and around in that incubation chamber. So, mapping out their journey into the unknown so that others may follow, they have boldly challenged the beliefs of man, turning their backs on the boundaries of mortality and turning their backs on the human paradigm of limitation. These light beacons amongst humanity are called the original ones or the ancient ones. In all the writings of scripture and holy scrolls or tablets, where the future is foretold, their presence here amongst men have been talked about. So let's go through the stages of evolution we have walked as we have climbed up this mountain into the high air above it, where only eagles dare to go. The human stages were stages of transformation, and all of these are mapped out in the book, The Journey to the Heart of God, if you want more information. The first stage of someone in humanness putting their feet on the path of enlightenment is called pristine humanness. This is a stage that is still within ego identification. And pristine humanness has itself three stages of progression: the initiate, the adept, the master. So in God consciousness, which is the next stage within the human paradigm, it's God consciousness. This also has three stages: emptiness, the fullness, and then the re-entering of the human condition. Ascended mastery is the third and final stage within being human. This has three stages: automatic action, the deep bliss, and reclaiming emotion. At the end of ascended mastery, emotion is very, very little and perception is very, very wide. At this point, the ascended master has to find their emotion and get it to flow strongly, because they need to make a big leap from humanness to godhood. So godhood are stages of transmutation. A god being in the flesh goes through two stages: living from the eye of the storm. He or she becomes an observer of life from an eternal perspective. Becoming the observer and the observed is stage 2. At this point, the master watches himself as he re-engages with life. Again, this stage is designed to produce energy and power, because again, a large evolutionary leap needs to be made into resurrection. Now, resurrection has the stages of transfiguration. It has 3 stages in which deeply mystical experiences take place. So resurrection has the characteristic or the purpose of integrating opposites into harmonious and unified expression. It again has 3 stages. Remember, only Godhood had 2 stages. So the first stage of resurrection is the unifying of inner and outer space. This is very disorienting at first, but the rewarding part of this stage is that it manifests internal intent in outer circumstances. So the second stage of resurrection is the combining of life and death. And this fills the resurrected master with deep, eternal peace. The master experiences a sense of immortality throughout the ages, stretching ahead over never-ending horizons. Now, the third stage is less comfortable. And sometimes when masters that I have seen amongst my light family reach this stage, they start wondering if they failed. They start wondering if they took a step backwards. So it's a stage in which no illusions can be harbored without evoking immediate responses and lessons in the environment. These hard knocks that are suddenly experienced is because the resurrected master stands for a most powerful evolutionary leap by transcending a reality beyond the subatomic building blocks of light and frequency. To this point, all of life has been held by the subatomic particles of light and frequency. Now, he or she has to move beyond that. For this, he needs all the power he can muster, power released by dissolving illusions. That is why in this third stage, illusions come knocking on the master's door, and he starts to wonder if he has stepped backwards. Every little illusion wants to be resolved because they are bound by power. And in dissolving them, they release that power that the master is going to need for the next very large step. The next step is the white light reality, the uncharted territory of a life beyond duality, a life in which immaculate high magic flows effortlessly through the vessel of the master's being. That is why we are studying the 384 principles that uphold such a life, the principles of high magic. So, beloved ones, I want to start getting this power that is needed for you not only to go into the white light, but to stay there. Some of you went in there when you visited me here in America at our private retreat, but things of the world pulled you back out again. So this time we want to gather enough power to stay there. So it comes through the insights of the wheels. There are 18 of these wheels. Let's look at wheel number 1. So in examining the information from these wheels, it will shed a lot of light on areas we've had questions about. The wheels we will talk about as though they are a clock. So I will say the first section we're going to examine is from 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And so if it's a clock, you can see exactly which section it is. So the lower sigil in this area from 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock, the lower big sigil in there says if we look at the upper sigil that's there, it says something very interesting. It says left for Altea. Left for Altea. Then, if we look at the 3 arrows below it, they come from, this is something that happened in the past. In these wheels, if arrows come from the past, from something in the past, if it's past history, in other words, they'll come from the left. If it's something yet to happen, like a prophecy, they'll come from the right. So 3 arrows and the turtle. Native Americans call planet Earth Turtle Island. They still use the symbol of the turtle for the Earth. So what this is saying is that life has begun on Earth, and as you know, life began with the original ones, that they left for a planet called Altea, and that they returned to Earth 3 times. The arrows point towards the turtle. And each time they found the Earth destroyed. Now, if you hold up your fingers, your hand with your fingers on, you will see you have 5 fingers, right? But you have four gaps in between those fingers. There have been 5 creations and recreations of humanity. There have been 4, which is in between these stages, interventions by the original ones who were responsible for creating humanity. So 3 times they returned, but the 4th time is now. 4th time they have come amongst humanity and lived like one of them among them. Now we go into, well, let's first just look at the comet on the right. See the stars and the moon and the comet. And then below the very bottom section is water. What this is saying is that the 4th time they came to create humanity and live amongst humanity as one of them, their presence prevented a comet from hitting the Earth and flooding it. Let's look, and incidentally, some of this is written in the sigils on the very left about preventing the comet. Otherwise, just like before, the Earth yet again would have been destroyed, and the 5th creation of man, which is currently living here, would also have been destroyed. So let us analyze the glyphs in the section from the clock would be 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. So the large left-hand section. And you will see that the water goes all the way from the comet section all the way to this section. So it is still talking about the same theme, that if the comet had struck, the time of man would have been a setting sun. It would have been closed. In other words, man would have completely been wiped out. Now, the sun has got these specific little rays on it in clusters of 2. That means the sun is setting. In other places in these wheels, you'll see a sun with a lot of little rays coming out of it, but not in clusters of 2. That means the sun is rising. Let us look at the numerical system. This system was still used by the Maya in ancient times. The section from 8 to 11. Right. See, next to the sun, there's a bar with 4 dots above it. This is a number that means the bar is 5 and the dots are 4, so this is number 9. If you were to have number 10, for instance, you'd have a bar and another bar above it, which is 2 5s, which is 10. So this is 9. Now, 9 is the number of completion. So the big sigil above it is also the sigil of completion. So it says that if the original ones did not come amongst humanity, humanity as a race would have been wiped out. Setting sun, completion of the race. Now, there's a bar that comes from right to left, and it is the bar that means transcendence. Because it comes from the right, remember, it means it's in the future. So let's look at the bird and the snake. In the pictoglyphs of ancient Mayans, the bird is usually an eagle and holds a snake. This is not an eagle, it's a dove. But when it's an eagle with a snake in the Mayan pictoglyphs, it means that the higher nature dominates the lower nature. In other words, it's enlightenment. But in this case, because it's a dove, it means actually that the original ones, which is this, their sign is the white dove actually in a blue circle. And incidentally, a white dove in a blue circle, it's also the symbol used for the planet Althea. Althea, I have looked at psychically. In other words, I've looked at in a visionary way, and it is massive. It's larger than Jupiter. It is saying that the original ones will, through transcendence, lift humanity above the destruction of the flood, the comet, the setting sun. Now, the sigil on the right is for level of transcendence. And it says that they are able to lift humanity to the third level of transcendence. So the sigils on the left just say, lifting humanity above catastrophe. So, Rogier, now let's go to wheel number 2. Let's look at the one section that goes from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock, the one with the funny-looking rabbit in it and the swallows. This wheel has fascinating information in it. A rabbit stands for speed is needed. We have the same symbol in our dream symbolism. Swallows, those are swallows because you can see because their little tails are split. Swallows stand for migration. But what in this case it means, and you can read that in the sigil below, is it says change, emphasis on opposites. It literally, the sigil below reads change, emphasis on opposites. Let's look at what this change would be. Up until this point, the goal of the original ones has been speed, which is the rabbit. This has been their emphasis. Speed of growth, moving from one stage to the next, climbing up that mountain as fast as they can. Now, stability is needed. If you take a look at the very top section, which is from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, there's a horizontal bar. That bar, because it crosses both lines, it stands for stability. Stability must now be emphasized more than rapid growth. So the left big sigil that is located there by 11 o'clock says, for man to move ahead in their evolution, the original ones have to move ahead in theirs. Now, how can we put this together when we have just said that we need to stop being so urgently moving and focus on stability? Well, if the original ones move up, might I add, into the white light reality, they will pull man out of the stages of ego identification into the godhood stages. The godhood stages would be much more stable for them. See, if we just look at the stages within the large egg of duality, the human stages are stages of transformation. The godhood stages are stages of transmutation. And then the resurrection stages are stages of transfiguration. Well, when I do your time maps, I can always tell how hard your year is going to be by clusters of timelines that deal with transformation. See, the cactus and the rocky road says man has had a rough, painful journey over a rocky road because they have been in the grand big stage of humanity in stages of transformation. Transformation sheds the old. So it's a shedding, it's a ripping away, it's loss. And essentially it can be described as destructuring, and that is exactly what we see in human society. So what this is saying is the original ones must find their way out of this egg of duality into the white light, and by doing that they will pull humanity into the God kingdom, which is a lot more comfortable place to be. Because that stage, which is the large stage of transmutation, effortlessly brings about evolution. It leverages life to a higher level without the pain of the shedding and so on. So it says, and this is in the sigils, in that band across the top, it says, firstly, that man is the root race of all cosmic races, meaning all star races. Then it says that they can be leveraged. In other words, the stages of alchemy can leverage their consciousness times 3. Now, what is in the other sigils on either side of the cactus? The left sigil means pain and opposition. The sigils on the right, including the smaller sigils below the big one, they give a very interesting insight into why humanity has been self-destroying themselves, drugs and alcohol and suicides, and why they have been destroying the planet. Sigils on the right of the cactus says, and see, this whole section deals with the pain of the journey for man. So man has been self-destructing and destructing the environment because of complete overload of hardship. See, this is a big insight for us because it's not an inherent flaw in mankind. This becomes important as we read about how the original ones created these 5 levels of humans. Because the planet keeps destroying itself based on human conduct, and they keep going just like parents do with kids that fail. Where did I go wrong? In other words, did I create the genetics in man that causes him to be this destructive? So each time they took pieces away from the DNA that they thought might be responsible for such destructiveness. But meantime, because man's role was transformation, it simply was the pain of the journey. that caused them to behave destructively. It wasn't an inherent flaw. So let's go to the third wheel. This sun isn't coming up above a horizon. It is fully illuminated. It stands for the God kingdom. And remember, man would be pulled up into the God kingdom by the original ones when they move into the white light. So there are pieces of the God kingdom that we need to know about and we didn't know before. If you look at those two human figures, the masculine is depicted as receptive. He receives. And she is depicted, the female is depicted as giving, which is proactive. Now, this is the complete opposite of what we've learned, that the masculine is proactive and the feminine is receptive. So this is the stage in which the roles of the poles shift. The feminine enacts the male way and the male enacts the feminine way. In godhood, this is what happens. And this is interesting because in the gods amongst our light family, I have found that the masculine gods and the feminine goddesses have a change in their nature that isn't obvious, and I couldn't put my finger on it. This is what happens. So the big sigil in the upper left, about 9 o'clock, means to elevate by grace. And the lower sigil, right below it, on the left, you will see the three little dots. And because they go vertically, they're not, and they don't add up, they multiply. Dots that go vertically are multiplications. So we understand that the elevation by grace therefore applies to man. The sun says, into the God kingdom. And then the lower sigil below, just to the left of the little man, says that humanity, when they go into this new stage, which is transmutational, can have up to 3 times. So it's times, right? So it's not plus, it's 3 times more consciousness leveraged during this stage. Now, interestingly enough, how does the feminine become proactive? Because too often amongst humanity, we find females trying to be as masculine as they can and feeling somehow that makes them better. But the female proactivity, which this female figure indicates, is described by those at the 4 o'clock position on the wall. You see that there are consecutive partial circles. This is actually the symbol for membrane, for matrices and membranes. A matrix is a membrane that has solidified, that has become a way of life. It tells life within it how to live. Then it becomes a matrix. So because we're dealing with water, because we're dealing with membrane that is curved, it says that the feminine proactivity is emotional. And I know this from experience, the benefit of emotion, like at the very last stage of ascended mastery, you need emotion. The benefit of emotion is that it breaks down membranes between stages. Evolution between stages and cycles becomes much easier. So upper right at 1 o'clock, big sigil, means releasing the old. And then that sort of a cone shape right below it at about 2 o'clock, that symbol stands for gradually decreasing. And because it's the sigil above it says release the old, we're really talking about gradually decreasing the whole of past expectations. Okay, so it says that basically, even though with grace, humanity will be moved into the God kingdom, they will still be expecting the old things of humanness, and it will take time for these matrices to break down as they gradually release the old. But it is man's ability for emotion that will help break it down, the feminine way of proactivity. Okay, let's do wheel number 4. So let's look at the very top writing. It reads, escaping the prison of duality. Now the big sigil on the right says 2 stages of godhood. See the 2 little dots? It says the 2 stages of godhood. If you look at 8 o'clock on the left, this is the sigil for the planetary underworld. Now, mountains and trees, mountains actually stand for inspiration, and trees stand for hope. See, man has had a hopeless situation. By going around and around and around their fishbowl of, they've been in ego identification, they accumulated so much baggage, and it has become such hardship that really, without the divine intervention of the original ones, they had no hope of escaping it. So this wheel is telling us how to escape it, how they'll escape it. See the person flying above the mountains? That indicates great perspective and ease of moving through life. So what in the world has the underworld sigil got to do on this glyph? And the rocks and the water below this very nice scene of the person floating with hope and inspiration. Beloved ones, if you recall that we actually got rid of not only the underworld, but it had become so full of past debris and pain and suffering that it created a second underworld. So we had not only a lower underworld, but we had a lower underworld. And that this dissolved, I believe it was either last year or the year before. And a lot of the original ones had major problems in their life at that time that they had to overcome because they were processing all this release of old debris. But what this is saying is the only way that man can have hope and inspiration to move forward. The only way he can soar above things and enter the 2 stages of godhood, which is to the right there, is to again form a subconscious. When man has to form a subconscious, the planet has to form an underworld. The subconscious is like taking a lot of garbage because your in-laws are coming to visit and your house is kind of dirty, and just sweeping them under the bed. By creating a subconscious and a planetary underworld yet again to contain the debris of man's ages, he is set free to fly. And it's interesting, just in closing, to contemplate that can we see now with some gratitude the role that demons fulfill? Because demons embody this debris and chaos of the underworld to keep it from flooding back into the people. It will be Wheel 5 today that we start with. But before we do that, let's just summarize exactly what we're doing. The wheels for this final section of the principles of high magic are derived from the sacred records, the tablets of fire, sent from the future. Unlike the other wheels for these principles, these contain priceless revelations about the origins of man and the 5 waves of creation of humanity that led up to the current human population. They reveal the role the advanced and ancient race known as the original ones have played in establishing life on Earth. To transition into a life of high magic, the master needs access to increased resources. So why are these wheels at the end of all of our wheels that go with the principles? Because the necessary power and energy to make this evolutionary leap comes from increased perception, to see further than we've ever seen before. So, to provide us with these profound insights and perception is exactly the gift of these final 18 wheels. Now, the next wheel, because all these wheels have names, I don't know if they are written for you to see on your screen, but they all have names. And wheel number 5 is the wheel of the secrets of fall. How did this massive cosmic fall happen? And it is clear that it is man's fall that pulled the cosmos into the fall. So, number 5 wheel is a little puzzling. It's got loose bricks everywhere, and we need to cement it together by looking at all the things that have been said in the 4 wheels that went before. So the writing in the middle says, those 2 lines of glyphs, it says, seek the tale of the cosmic fall of consciousness in the DNA of man. That is so crucial to understanding what this wheel is saying. We should read it again. Seek the tale of the cosmic fall of consciousness in the DNA of man. In other words, the whole cosmos fell because of something to do with man. And the owl has to do with see through the unknown, get perception where you didn't have it before, in other words. The small writing on the very left, at 9 o'clock and just above it, says all diminishing. So everybody diminished during this fall. Okay, so now let's go to the other sigils that are here. First of all, the little ones that start from 1 o'clock and go all the way to 10 o'clock at the top, teeny little ones, they are saying cycle 1, cycle 2, and you're reading from right to left in this case, cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3, and cycle 4. That's what they say. Now, on the right, just above those 2 UFO images, is a sigil that says 7 contributed. Then, if you look at that horizontal bar at the very bottom, it starts at about 7 o'clock. That says external influence from the past. Okay, so the past is to the left, remember? So external influence from the past. But at 7 o'clock, there is a very puzzling message in that symbol, in that sigil right there. It says cyclical insemination, cyclical insemination. On the bottom right, at about 5 o'clock, it says animal kingdom. And what does all this say altogether? Especially the cyclical insemination. We will glue this together for you. And I'm drawing from material in some of the other other wheels to do this. Because by itself, this wheel really would have to be very carefully studied to make any sense. So this is the background to this wheel so you can understand why it's saying what it is. Because the original ones, genetic creators of man, found the earth so destroyed that it was almost uninhabitable. After each time of returning to earth from the planet Altea, they assumed that man had too much power and not enough awareness to match it. As a result, with each subsequent wave of human creation, they deliberately reduced their abilities. Now, there's another factor also about this reduction in abilities with each wave of man that we can discuss a little later. So, in the first 3 creations of man, creation 1, creation 2, creation 3. And remember, we're in the 5th creation now. Those 3, they were created from God DNA. In other words, the original ones gave some of their own DNA to create this new creation. And deep inside humanity, there's a faint memory that sometime long ago they were great. So the first 3, they were derived from God DNA. But according to some of the other wheels, the 4th creation, they were derived from part alien races, and 7 contributed, and part animal, hence the animal kingdom sigil on this. So no longer God DNA, alien races and animal. Well, where did this 5th creation come from? Darwin was right, from the animal kingdom. No more alien DNA, no more God DNA. Man comes from the animals. So now you can understand why some of those previous wheels were so important in their information. One of the wheels says animals preceded man. They were there before man. Now let's look at this extremely puzzling one at 7 o'clock on this wheel. What is cyclical insemination? Well, this information yet again comes from another wheel. The 3rd wave of creating man, and remember, man was the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd time of being created was done with God DNA. So from the 3rd creation of man, all the other star races came. And now, at the 4th creation of man, the star races are producing their DNA to create man. It's a little bit like incest. It's like incest. Incest is when there's children produced from mingling family members. When you have inbreeding like that, inbreeding will create diminished capacity in the offspring and accentuate flaws dramatically. And very many of the flaws we see in man is from this genetic cyclical reproduction, in other words, inbreeding. Because if there was a little flaw, and see, my beloved ones, individuation. Okay, if you have the ocean and you're going to individuate by taking a few buckets of the ocean, which is individuation, each bucket is going to have the same water in it. In other words, we would all be exactly the same. But what you do is you take a little bit of the minerals out of one, another part of the minerals out of two. Now you've created differentiation. So flaws create individuation when you're creating the star races. And it's little pieces that were deliberately taken out to create uniqueness. But there were already blind spots in man's consciousness when from him came the other star races during the third wave of humanity. So now, from these flaws, if you then again create man, which has a template with its own flaws that was passed on to the star race, you have extremely exaggerated flaws. So, to summarize, what we're saying is that there are so far two factors, and I want to give you a third, but there are two factors that created man to be less and less and less and less. The first one is that because they kept trashing their environment, the original ones assumed that to preserve the earth, they had to give them less and less capacity. But if you remember, there was something they were missing, and that was explained in wheel number 2, which had the cactus and the rocky road representing pain and hardship. It had the wheel of this glyph of transformation on it. It's trying to tell us it's because man was locked into the role of transformation, which is hardship, because you have to keep shedding things and destructuring. That is why man really became so depressed he didn't want to live, and he didn't care if he self-destructed or he destroyed the planet, because life was one of pain. So it was an important message for the original ones to get, that it isn't a flaw in the way they made man, which would, at that point we call pristine man, a very much higher race. The flaw is in the role they played that they couldn't get out of. Secondly, the inbreeding with the star races that we've explained is a second reason that the fourth and the fifth wave of humanity were just substantially reduced. But there is actually another reason. And last night when I looked through these wheels again, I understood it. And it went like this. During the first 3 waves of human creation, God DNA was given to each of those groups. But when I study that, I find that there is some slight diminishment that happens there as well of the human creation. And I was puzzled by this, but I realized that when a parent gives of their own awareness to make a child, the assemblage point is a bright ball of light about an arm's length in, let's say, a human, an arm's length behind the heart. It's on the outer fields around the physical body. That is called the assemblage point, but it can also be called an awareness point, because it is responsible for assembling the reality around you, but it is also responsible of what you can be aware of. Each child that a couple produces creates a black spot on their assemblage point, meaning they've taken a little piece of their awareness and put it into the next generation. It's not just a genetic transfer, It's also an awareness transfer to create the next generation. Now, if somebody has 5 kids, you have 5 spots on your awareness point, on that assemblage points, 5 black spots. So this is what happened with the original ones when they created man. With each subsequent generation, of which there were 3 that they contributed to the making of man, they lost a little bit of their own awareness. This not only reduced themselves, but it reduced what they were creating, because they were creating the same thing each time. So if by the first time they created a wave of man, they did it with 100% of their awareness, if it was reduced by 10% each time, they would have less ability to create the new generations that came after the first, the second, and the third. So these are the secrets of how the great fall happened, that was across all the races in the cosmos. So because I've given you this lengthy story, my beloved ones, you're going to understand glyphs on the subsequent wheels a lot quicker. For instance, let's look at wheel number 6. Bottom 7 o'clock, it says animals preceded man. The small glyphs at 6 o'clock says genetic hierarchy. See, that genetic hierarchy needs to be considered, because besides the original ones, man is the first on the pyramid of created beings. Then come other star races. But these star races have done everything they can to destroy man and steal their planet. Some have pretended to be friendly, others have been openly hostile, but the ultimate goal was the same. They wanted man gone. But only a few star races realized that if man is gone, so will they perish. You can't pull out the base of a group of blocks stacked on each other without them all falling over. Okay, so if we look at this wheel, at 4 o'clock, there's that little reptile, and it's actually a frog that's moving through the air. We know that because the sigil says Ampha Pabian. We learned about the Ampha Pabian when we did the music of the known planets. They are on the left side. As you look at the belt of Orion, they are the star on the left side. That's their planet. And they have come from a very heavy emphasis on genetic material from frogs. They look like big frog beans, but like they're bipedal, meaning they have a human shape. Then at 3 o'clock, there's a little sigil that says Su, and this is a bird race that comes from the constellation of Pisces. Okay, so if we go now to the 12 o'clock big sigil, it says living library. Not only is humanity a living library, but the animal species on the earth is a living library for many races. So the giraffe represents the animal kingdom. The sigil just to the right of the giraffe says, others perish. The one at 9 o'clock, which is the big sigil, says, man lives. Man lives, others perish, could mean that if man doesn't live, others will perish. Or it could mean that great care is being taken that man will survive by the original ones, because they understand this hierarchy of genetics. That's why they're here. So they keep preserving man, and others are dying, so why aren't you preserving us? Because if I preserve man, you can be recreated. They're a living library. But if man perishes, so do the other races. Okay, so at 12 o'clock, there's a big sigil that says the fifth wave of man, and it's in the quadrant that speaks about the animal kingdom. So it's basically telling us, now you understand it because you have the background, that the fifth wave of man came from the animal kingdom. So let's go to wheel 7. This wheel sets my mind at least at ease, because previously we saw that for man to move up to the next level, which is the God kingdom, he has to form a subconscious. A subconscious is where all the unresolved stuff has been temporarily stored. Metamorphosis. Frogs everywhere. They represent the symbol for metamorphosis. So my concern has been, well, you can't stuff things away in a drawer forever. At some point, the drawer is going to overflow. So man's subconscious holds all these things that he couldn't fix. So at what point is it going to come out? And this wheel gives us some answers. The large glyph at 1 o'clock says, change through grace. The frog is metamorphosis. And then we have the 4 downward lines coming in. And they also stand for change through grace from higher levels bestowed. Now at 3 o'clock, those smaller bits of writing there, they say the same thing. They say the gift of metamorphosis. So let's just go to where man is on the left of the dividing line, which is 7, 8, 9 o'clock. The 3 big glyphs say humanity requires intervention. The bottom 3 small lines of glyphs say, the first line says honoring, the second one says ancient, and the third one says contracts. Honoring, ancient, contracts. So man requires some help. Okay, and you can see from how that figure is that he's trying to climb up in a way that is really impossible to get upwards. So it is saying that man is so at the bottom of the fall that he can't get out by himself. And the original ones contracted to come amongst man and help him out of this deep hole. That insert that is from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock shows again a frog jumping from one stone to the next, or from one solid piece to the next. Frog again represents metamorphosis. And the jump from one level to the next means that old ways of linear growth will be bypassed. So the drops that are falling into that lower water, which is like a stagnant pond, that pond at the very bottom at sort of 6 o'clock represents the subconscious of man, and the drops falling in means it will be beneficially affected through this metamorphosis. So it is saying that, listen, that drawer is going to be effortlessly cleaned out. And it will be done bit by bit by bit as man lives at a higher level. All he has to do is thrive. Dragonfly represents fertility or thriving. The 3 glyphs below the dragonfly says fertility purifies the suppressed. So what is being suppressed? The subconscious, deliberately so that man could fly free. But it says that if he thrives, if he blooms where he's planted, it will automatically purify the subconscious. It doesn't have to be a um, dramatic spilling of old stuff into the present like it has been in the past. So here, let's go to wheel 8. Can you give us its name, please? Okay, remember how I told you that if a sun has lots of little lines like this, it means the dawning? And if it has clusters of 2 lines, that means the setting of the sun? So far, all we've seen is the sun is setting on certain things, meaning they're not going to exist much longer. So the pictogram of the woman stands for the divine feminine, and the divine feminine always has long hair. Long hair is its image. So it's pushing open like a shell. It means that the divine feminine shall cast away all that has suppressed it. But the rest of this wheel goes on to tell us, okay, the time of the divine feminine is dawning. She shall push aside all that has suppressed her. But this will affect cosmic life. How? The big glyph on the outer rim at 1 o'clock, it says emotional knowing. And emotional is that glyph, and at 2 o'clock, that glyph is knowing. In other words, as the divine feminine rises in both men and women, there will be a new way of thinking. It's not intuition. It's just that I know through how I feel. Now, the big glyph to her right that she's looking at is the glyph for tonal luminosity. In other words, her rising will heal one of the most basic schisms of duality, the most basic splits. When light and frequency integrate and become one, they form tonal luminosity. And the big glyphs at 11 o'clock are saying light and frequency unite. In other words, her rising will cause the very building blocks of life to metamorphose to a higher level. Now, the small glyph at 9 o'clock says self-trust, because for so long, mind has dominated the way we access reality and analyze it and take it in, that we must trust the emotional knowing that we will feel. And I can tell you that all of you are at that point. So let's look at what the big line of glyphs say at the bottom. The unification of body, soul, and spirit. This takes place at the very end of resurrection level 3, the unification of body, soul, and spirit. The 3 dots on the left stand for body, soul, spirit, and on the right it stands for life, death, ascension. Because those are the vehicles for life, for death, and for ascension. So why is it important to name those? Because, beloved ones, if body, soul, and spirit unite, it removes the illusion of life, which is mortality, death, and ascension. Life, death, and ascension has been the triad we've been moving around for ages. So when it unites, we are ready to move beyond these cycles of repetitive existence. So wheel number 9, the wheel of awakening from the dream. When I first saw this image, it looked to me like somebody trapped in a world of mirrors. So you don't know what's real, you don't know what's unreal. So the 3 top sigils around the figure says on the left, the 11 o'clock one says mirrored. In the middle, it says dormant. On the right, it says realities. It says that we are living in mirrored realities because something is dormant. Now, at 9 o'clock, that big sigil tells us what is dormant. The frequency component of DNA is what it says. And at 7 o'clock, that sigil says awaken. And the two sigils on the left of the butterfly says song of wholeness. So before we go to the rest of these very interesting pictoglyphs and numerical system that's written here, let's just see so far and tie this together. So it says that man, see, she's resting on her knees. It's like she's sleeping there. She represents humanity. Actually, it may even be a he, I'm not quite sure. But it is saying man has been in this dream state because some of his DNA sound chambers, the frequency component depicted in our glyph that we have like a rose, are dormant. They're asleep. So if you want to awaken man from its dream, you have to awaken those dormant DNA chambers. And when you do, man will not be what we see him as now. He will sing with his life the song of wholeness. Now, the bees represent the disrupted interdependence. It can be the disrupted ecological interdependence of the food chain, but it can also be disrupted genetic interdependence of this genetic hierarchy we've been speaking about. So these little lines and dots everywhere, they're numbers. And if you look on the DNA rose, it has numbers in every single little petal, which is a sound chamber if you superimpose it over a DNA strand. It is mapping out for us exactly which chambers of the DNA need to be awakened within man. Beloved ones, how do we awaken DNA within man? By living the things they represent within ourselves. The presence of these holy ones, which are the original creators of man and the star races, is such a powerful force on earth. This is who you are, or you wouldn't be sitting here listening to this. So if they live a certain frequency, it spreads throughout humanity and awakens their DNA through resonance. Resonance is a powerful way they affect humanity. It's like playing middle C on the piano, and when you look in the back, you will see that every single C is vibrating. It's through resonance. So the butterfly pictoglyph, butterfly means gift. And a flower with many petals like that, with the butterfly on top of it, the petals mean the many, or it could mean all. So butterflies on top of that, it means gift to all. If you awaken the dormant chambers within man, you awaken it within all races. The snail means that the effects we'll see in humanity will be gradual. It will be a slow process of unfolding. But trust that it will be there, because if you look for it, you help bring it about. And if you just look at their animalistic behavior, you also bring that about. So we'll go now to wheel number 10. See the spiral and the setting sun and the three balls on top of the sun. These are actually pictoglyphs that the Hopis still have on their lands. The ancient glyphs, that are written in the red rocks. So the female represents the original ones because she has long hair. And they still use these for the meaning that I'm going to give you. This 10th wheel represents stored resources. Now, the squirrel always has to do with be busy, busyness. So I interpreted this initially as get busy. But yesterday, when I interpreted the wheels for you, I said one thing wrong. It was on wheel number 2. And usually, when I say something wrong like that, it's because there's something I have to see. So wheel number 2 had to do with the hardship man has to deal with as in his role of transformation. And there was a rabbit, and I said the rabbit has to do with speed. We need to speedily correct this. But that's not the case. It was trying to tell us exactly what the squirrel is trying to tell us. That the speed at which the original ones were gathering their resources through very, very much speedy progression and busyness at their own evolution has pulled humanity into increased transformational activity, meaning that things around them are so unstable and they lose so much so quickly that they could not find stability. And because of not being able to find stability, they couldn't put down roots. Now, a mouse that is on this wheel, mouse always says, there's a mystery here. The glyph next to the mouse is the glyph that says mystery. So the three glyphs to the right of the woman says, the top glyph says release, and then resources, perception. Okay, the tree at 9 o'clock, the 3 glyphs there, well, there's a little dot, see? So we have 3 dots above the sun, and here's a 4th dot. The glyphs say the 4th, bringer balance. Those 3 glyphs, the top one says 4th, middle one says bringer, and the lower one says balance. And the tree, in a pictoglyph that represents a complete tree, it will also actually show the roots. This has no roots. So it stands for growth without roots. So, beloved ones, let's look over at 2 o'clock, at the sun setting. The sun is setting on the 3. The spiral means a closing of a particular period. This is at 3 o'clock, right? And what 3? Well, that glyph tells us, the one that's at 3 o'clock. The sun is setting on 3 things, and this glyph says stages of change. Now, this is really important because it's only in resurrection, at the very end of resurrection stages. Well, it starts at the beginning of resurrection stages. It just goes more and more high, but let's just stay with that. Up until resurrection, man is on a flat 2-dimensional surface of life. He moves around and around a triangle of transformation, transmutation, transfiguration. But this time is coming to a close. Sun is setting on it. According to what we've just seen, the 4th, which is transcendence, as a method of change, is what will bring roots to life. It will bring stability to man, and it will bring rootedness and stability to the original ones because of how busy they are growing. Now, beloved ones, we have seen how humanity is going to be helped in multiple ways. A, by the presence of the original ones. B, by creating that subconscious so that they can move into the God kingdom. By switching the poles so that the feminine's proactive broadcasting of emotion makes transitions easier. It breaks down matrices. But because the original ones have moved into resurrection, and remember that whatever they do affects man through resonance, they are gifting humanity with more stability by bringing in the fourth level of change, the fourth stage of change, which brings stability, which is transcendence. Now, let's just explain what transcendence does to see how big of a gift it really is. It changes channel on the television. You don't like what you see, you change the channel. On your time maps, if a day has a number 4 on it, the number 4 is transcendence. It is recommended on that day that you look at what in your environment doesn't please you and you replace it with what does. Let's just give an example. Let's say you don't like the way others see you, in the way you dress and act. So you decide that you'll try and give them the message that you're not predictable and replace the way that you look with a completely different look. That is the kind of action to take on a day of transcendence. So let's go to wheel 11. Ishnate Subatu Visut. Ishnate Visut. That means, come not near me, meteor. Te basically is used to say go away. It means don't come near. So this one is a prophecy. The next one, number 12, is also prophecy. As far as I know, these are the only 2 prophecies in these wheels. And they are called preventable prophecies, meaning it's trying to tell us there's something here you have to prevent or do. Because after all, man's conduct previously called in such disasters that wiped out life on earth. You are here to prevent this. So it is the glyphs are saying that the pictures are saying 3 meteors are coming and they are progressively larger and they're coming to the earth. The sigils on the right, which is at 3 o'clock, and the 2 that's right above it, so that whole little cluster there at 3 o'clock, it says the origins known and unknown. It says origins known and unknown. 2 fish represent 2 unknown factors, and the bird is 1 known factor. Birds are always thought, a perception, something that's known. And the 3 big sigils on 10 o'clock and 9 o'clock says the following words: 1 alien race and another hostile. Actually, sorry, the hostile is that glyph that has the 3 little dots on it. So the upper writing says 1, you see this 1 dot, 1 alien race, and another is those 3 lines of big glyphs, and then the one with the little dots it is saying hostile. But what does that small little bit of writing next to it say? Prevent. You know, there has been such a quarantine placed around the earth, and so many star races have been sent away from the moon, from the earth, from even the solar system, but not completely the solar system. And the way to get to the earth is to send big meteors in and wipe out life on earth. So the first small one, which you can't see because you just see the impact in the water, is the one that is of natural causes. Then the next two that come, progressively larger ones, come from two different alien races that have redirected them so they will impact the Earth. You see those three arrows at 1 o'clock? They indicate this is in the future, and they indicate that these are three things from outer causes that will be coming in to our sphere. So, beloved ones, I have asked then obviously, what is it that we have to live to prevent this? Self-trust in the body's ability to self-heal, self-sustain, and self-rejuvenate. So let me repeat that. Self-trust in the body's ability to self-heal, self-sustain, and self-rejuvenate. So number 12 wheel, I remember the name of it. This is called the Wheel of the Moon. So the glyphs on the left side say the bright side of the moon. See, the sun has only rays to one side. When you read records, it means to illuminate, to shine brightly on. So this section to the left of the dividing line represents the moon. And, you know, all these craters and so on is showing us this is the moon. So let's go to the right side. Let's go to 2 o'clock. See the ants? Ants mean many workers. It says there's many workers on the dark side of the moon. Then it says the glyphs right below the ants at 3 o'clock is saying that there are three structures. I know there are 4 dots, but those dots say multiplying by 4. So, you know, that would be a whole other story. But there are 3 structures on the dark side of the moon housing many workers. Now, the glyphs, remember this is a preventable prophecy, okay? The 2 lines of glyphs that are at about 4 o'clock says treachery from their own. That one big dot at 5 o'clock says 1, and the other glyphs stand for atomic bomb. And the line with the 2 dots on the left of atomic bomb, which is that bowl, stands for 120,000 dead. So in other words, whoever put the workers up there, and I think we all know who that could be, whoever put the workers up there is going to kill them, and 120,000 people will perish. So why would they do this? Let's look at the little family at the bottom, 6 o'clock. To the left, that glyph, to the left of them, the glyph at 7 o'clock says Mars. It is saying some families were moved to, that's what the dot there indicates, some families were moved or evacuated before killing the rest to Mars. So whatever the reasons are, their attention is going to colonizing Mars. And the moon actually was just a stepping stone how to do that. So how do we prevent this prophecy? This prophecy can be prevented by the original ones taking time and looking through their lives for anything that is self-destructive. Are you looking for signs of aging on your body? What you look for, you will surely find. Are you comparing yourself to human standards? Are you sullying, meaning making impure your eyes by watching death, depravity, and destruction on your television? Look through the things that are self-destructive to a God being in the flesh. Now let's go to wheel 13. It's a wheel of transmutation of nature. Transmutation means to leverage up to a higher level. The setting sun at 10 o'clock is saying the sun is setting on nature in man's reality. That's what the glyphs is also saying, that's right below the sun. The sun is setting on nature in man's reality. Underneath the sheaths of wheat that you see there, at 5 o'clock, the glyph says, original ancient grains. The flower stands for the flower kingdom, the bird stands for the bird kingdom, and the antelope stands for the animal kingdom. Now, the big glyph in the very middle is the glyph for transmutation. So the answer to this very sad story we have deciphered so far is below the antelope. We have been saying how man will be moved up to a new reality, a higher God reality. Well, it says species have left for another reality to wait for man. That's the glyphs below the antelope. That is good news, beloved ones. I love songbirds so much. Scientists have found like 40 to 60% of songbird species have simply disappeared. They have no idea where they are or if they died off. They could never find any little bodies. They're just gone. So now we have wheel number 14. Wheel of Transcendence. Wheel of Transcendence. Well, let's look at what this glyph says. The big one says, the very big one at the top says resurrection. And the three smaller ones surrounding it say first level, second level, third level. Then in the triangle right above it that goes from 1 o'clock to 10 o'clock, that triangle with the two scarabs in it. The two scarabs represent life and death. The glyph on the left in that triangle says life, and the glyph on the right of the triangle says death. The big ball there is that, see, it has a deeper meaning. Yes, it represents death. But to the ancient Egyptians, the scarab represented resurrection. And the resurrection is that a scarab is basically a dung beetle, dung being horse droppings and so on. It finds the dung of other animals and he rolls it into a ball. And this ball is much bigger than himself, but he uses it to lay for his new offspring, to lay his, I guess, eggs in. So the fact that new scarabs or dung beetles emerge from this a cocoon of debris is like a resurrection. So let's look at the section that has the human figure in it. Again, those arrows mean beneficial assistance from higher realms. Now, interesting, there are 4 of these lines coming in. The number 4 we've seen in the previous wheel represents the 4th stage of change, which is transcendence. The 2 glyphs on the left of the female figure at 8 o'clock and 7 o'clock read assisted transcendence. The serpent on the right is the DNA. The top sigil says genetic and the bottom sigil says alteration, genetic alteration. So the female figure represents the original ones, but the arms that are up in supplication mean we're calling in help. Because assistance, we're calling in assistance. So, beloved ones, let's just focus on what we can do, create assisted transcendence for humanity and all life on earth. And I will tell you that I don't know exactly how to do this. It'll take me quite a bit of time to figure that out. But what it is saying is that there are 5 templates that should be superimposed over the human DNA rose pattern. In other words, you have your rose pattern for human DNA, but there are 5 templates, like an overlay, that should be placed over this DNA, because remember, their DNA comes from animals. So how can we create elevated DNA that they are able to replace this messy reality they're in with the God reality? There are 5 templates to place into their DNA that will have to be generated by the original ones in some way that I don't yet know. And the templates have names. Those little sigils next to the snake being DNA, they are names. So the top one is Aleph, Suvatra, and the bottom one is Hursatep. So Aleph, Suvat. So when I know how to do this, beloved ones, I will share it with you. I'd like to begin with a summary of where we left off yesterday again, and it's for 2 reasons. It will help you understand the last 4 wheels better. And also, I want to tie it into an experience I had a few months ago that I had no idea had a connection to this, but it's becoming clear. Because the original ones, and remember, they were the genetic creators of man. They came back to Earth 4 times, excluding this time when they've come amongst man. Well, each of those 4 times when they came back, they found the Earth so destroyed that it was uninhabitable for a very long time. I have seen visions of how the original ones repaired the earth. They did it with sacred geometry, which is the dynamic geometry that we write about in Journey to the Heart of God. Well, where were they coming from? Remember, they have a second home, which is Altea, a large planet that if we have a name for it known on Earth, we don't. It's just a number. It's out in space. Well, each time they came back and found that yet again man had destroyed the earth, they assumed that man had too much power and not enough awareness to match it. So the power was used destructively. So, as a result, they actually deliberately reduced man's abilities with each of the waves of creation, of which the current one is the 5th. So they decided to create the star races from man's 3rd creation. Now, that's kind of interesting because it does tell us that for a long time there were no star races, just man. And I think this is the deep memory that creates such a juvenile belief that we're the only race in the star systems. And until, photography and various other methods and group sightings showed that, listen, they are coming from other planets. For thousands of years, man thought he's the only race in the whole cosmos, because at one time he was. So the decision to create the star races from man's 3rd creation, but to use those star races' DNA in creating the 4th creation of man, produced the exact same problems that genetic inbreeding does. An offspring of incest, of interfamily relations, they suffer from a loss of abilities and aggravated flaws. Many of man's very negative traits that we see today, and we wonder, how could they be like this? resulted from this. They're basically the children of incest. So why did these flaws, first of man, passed on to the star races, and then the star races pass it back on to man, and it is now very aggravated? There are several questions we could be asking, such as, well, why, if the original ones recreated man each time, why didn't they take these flaws out of there and create them more perfectly? Why, when the star races were created, did they not eliminate certain mistakes? Because we must firstly define what we mean by mistakes. We've often said there is no such thing as mistakes. We're just using the word here to describe something. What is it? Mistakes are the unique blind spots that an individual has that creates their unique perspective. What separates one bucket of water from the ocean from another bucket of water in the ocean is perspective. And this perspective comes from creating deliberate blind spots. So these were passed on so that individuation could be held. Recently, tremendous purification has gone on Earth and in the cosmos, but it has been different than past purifications. Like in 2005, what happened is what I call the Judgment Day of Revelations, the book of Revelation. It speaks about in the book of Revelation in the Bible, which is the last book of it, it speaks about how humankind, as well as the dead, stood before the Creator and they were judged whether they were worthy to continue life or not. Many hostile kingdoms, meaning hidden realms, and races, like from Orion, were completely eliminated at that time. And I have often had the students say to me, but I thought we eliminate this or that, and why is it back again? What eliminated meant was simply to remove them from our current reality of awareness. The way they were just shifted somewhere else on this loop of life that we were on. It's a bit like somebody dying. They're not really gone. They're just shifted to another realm. But what has been happening recently, and I would say it's been going on for 5 or 6 months even, is that the removal of beings is a complete annihilation of their individual templates. If we have a person in front of me, and they're removed from this reality, we're going to meet them again sometime in the future if we're still, as we have been in the past, traveling around in a cycle. However, if you remove that person's template of existence, that template is like the code that makes him a different person than the rest of the unindividuated ocean. If you remove the bucket walls, this is no longer a person. It's just been reabsorbed back into the ocean. So this is a little advanced information, my beloveds, but if you can't get what I'm saying, just let it flow by. The reason that the flaws were passed from generation to generation of creations of humanity is because their templates were preserved. That which makes individuations within a wave of man, those templates were preserved. And those templates, they were formed by the mistakes. The individuations were formed by the mistakes. So there were deliberate blind spots written into those templates. So if you make subsequent generations of man and you keep their flaws, but now with the inbreeding from a third generation who inherited their form, their flaws, They're actually made bigger, but you give them less ability, so less perception to solve their flaws. Because we eliminate flaws through perception, but with less and less resources, they had less and less ability to do that. So basically, man deteriorated and deteriorated and deteriorated. Deep in this memory, that is part of his template, he remembered a time when he was the greatest race of all except for the original ones. But if you put memories of greatness into someone that has distorted vision, it becomes arrogance. Instead of power to cooperate with life, it becomes power to dominate life. So they have dominated the species, they've dominated the ecosystems, and they've dominated the planet with very bad results. Now, Wheel 15 is the wheel of two realities. The two figures in the glyphs, the high ones, this is a masculine figure, otherwise it would have long hair to indicate this is the original one, but in the wheel this is placed higher, so you know the top figure is one of the original ones, and the lower figure represents humanity. And the glyphs tell us what that little circle is that is being passed from the originals ones to humanity. What is that circle? The glyphs read, that's the glyphs right underneath it, read transferring self-government. Now, in the Ohio workshop, the information that came was to stress and stress and stress that it's time for us to claim our divine heritage and focus on it and stop trying to fix math. We have a set of wheels that just precede these 18 wheels. And here, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they go right, there's 26 of them that I have at least, and they go right before these 18 wheels. Is that right? These wheels are the tablets. They contain tablets and glyphs, and they're the tablets for claiming the divine heritage. I am at the point with my soon-to-be 19-year-old daughter in which the complete focus on raising her has to pass to her so that she can assume young adulthood and be more self-governing. This is the goal of transferring self-government from the original ones to humanity. How do we do that, actually? It doesn't mean that we don't step in when we see major issues that are beyond humanity's capacities that could damage the earth. An example would be getting rid of the hostile alien races. Humanity didn't know what to do with it. But it does mean that we don't look at politics anymore and say, what can we do to diffuse this North Korean situation or whatever it is? We simply focus on ourselves. It's time for more focus on the parents, on their self, stepping in only when the earthly habitat is endangered, and living our divine heritage, and knowing in our heart that the greatest gift anyone can give to the rest of creation is to be all they can be and to live their highest potential. So it's a shift of focus that's similar to a parent with a growing up child. It doesn't mean we let them do irreparable damage. It simply means we're taking more time for ourselves. The top band of glyphs read, "We leave now our children, yet among you we stay." Let me repeat that. "We leave now our children, yet among you we stay." Top band, the one that goes from 11 o'clock down to 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. The bottom band is telling us how we are still helping them by focusing on ourselves. The bottom one is the band of man. It says, by your grace are we elevated. By your grace are we elevated. So, beloved ones, because of preparation we've made, we should be able to go through the remaining 3 wheels quite rapidly. So I want to take the time now to discuss, and after looking at all these wheels, what it is telling me about the original ones that corresponds with something that happened some months ago. It was the time we were banishing all alien races from the earth by removing certain alien aspects within us. You were doing the work to make this happen, and I was overseeing that we were doing everything we should, and that we didn't skip something, because there were hybrids of aliens and humans. There were aliens posing as humans. It was complex. So what happened is that there was one race who claimed that they preceded man and that they were definitely the inhabitants of the earth, not man. That man was a more recent occurrence on earth than they were. And this is their historical records that they were citing. They say that if our scholars take a look at the oldest date that they have for when man began as a race, that they will find it's impossible for man to have developed such a complex being in such a short span of time. And they were pointing out that this current human race happened overnight. They were just not there one day, and one day they were, and that they preceded that date when man actually started to inhabit the earth. And these are the reptilians. They're greenish, and they live in the crust of the earth. But see, what they did not realize, and I must tell you, that their arrogance was monstrous. It was just horrible. They view man as little more than the flies that are around a dung heap. So that was the first thing that they pointed out. And they pointed out how their superior mind powers, technological ability, and vast intelligence showed that they were the older race. They categorically denied that there was any humans in the hollow earth. They said it was impossible to have any beings inside the hollow earth. So they spoke about where did humans come from. And they said, and when I listened to this conversation, that was almost like they were on trial, state your case, like an attorney would. If I listened to their explanation, I could feel some awe and almost intimidation from and by the ones that they described as the creators of humanity. They said they developed humanity genetically, and that man did not come from evolution from the animals, but that their DNA helped contribute to man. So what they did not realize, of course, is that these were the original ones. They knew they came from another planet. They didn't know from where, and they said nobody knew from where. Well, how can they know what everybody knows? Maybe it's an issue of Akashic records, but the original ones put a shield of invisibility around Altea. So they said that these beings, and they called them this old race because they don't know when they began, but they say that there is no star race in the whole cosmos that cannot be totally dominated by these beings if they chose. In other words, in their way of gauging power, it's how many races can we dominate. And they're saying that this old race is basically the most powerful of all. They also said that they are expecting them back soon. Well, they have been here for, I would say, about 50 years. Some came earlier, but very few. They did not realize that this ancient race, which not only the Hopis prophesied would come back, but these reptilians said were due back, they did not realize that there were 4 waves of humanity preceding this one that came before. So we can deduce they arrived between the 4th and the 5th creation of man at a time when the earth really was very uninhabitable, so they went into the crust of the earth. You know, this reminds me a bit. I will be frank with you, I have never been a child, but I have memories for myself to create continuity of childhood, the same memories given, say, to my whatever is left of my blood family, supposedly. So in my memories, I was a little blonde girl with little braids, riding my little red tricycle and terrorizing the chickens at a home of my supposed parents in South Africa. So my favorite word, it drove my parents crazy, was why. I guess it still is. But I wanted to know where did babies come from? So for the first couple of years, my mother answered me with from heaven. So I used to lie in bed at night and think of the absolute miracle of babies arriving in their cribs from heaven. I was sure that they were sent down on a beam of light. So when our neighbor got very, very fat suddenly, and I commented on it, my mother explained that she had a baby in her tummy. I grew extremely upset that she might have eaten the baby. So my mother tried to comfort me by explaining, no, the baby came from heaven and sleeps in the tummy till it's time for it to come out. So I next envisioned this beautiful golden ray of light with the baby sliding down it, going right into the lady's tummy. So when I was 9 years old, events made it necessary for my mother to explain to me how the baby is created. I was so disappointed and disillusioned because this was an extremely unpoetic way to make a baby, and I preferred the poetry of my vision better. Okay, so this is now the time for the original ones to leave the old poetry and find out how babies are made. I can understand that the reptilian beings thought of them as just another star race because they came from Altea. And because I've had 3 star beings actually materialize in one of my Toronto workshops in the back of the class, they came from Antares. And they were one specific race that was in that star system. Well, when I asked them where was their craft, they said that they can travel without any. So the original ones, being the most advanced race in the cosmos, I'm quite sure did not need spacecraft. So the point is that everybody has respect for them because they know that without any technology they can cause the crash of an aircraft, a spacecraft, which incidentally has happened when star races try to come back. You'll find that even in Russia, there are accounts of these big fireballs falling on the earth. Those are aliens trying to come back. But the babies they made, which is humanity, were genetically engineered children. Their DNA was created, and I know this is less poetic than to see them appear in a ball of light, but this is how it was done. So let us go to Wheel 16, and we have often discussed this, the reasons for the fall of man. This is the name of this wheel. So the bottom glyphs read, the fifth creation of human DNA from animals came. Now comes the tale of your heroism. And by the way, just to complete the symbolism, the animals and the bird kingdom, it is saying this, they represent the animal kingdom. The glyphs have told us what they're saying about our DNA. And the serpent shape around the pole is our DNA. And those 5 balls indicate 5 creations of our DNA. So back to the tale of your heroism. Having learned the lessons of how to make babies and how to raise babies, the original ones can see things that they can do differently. That's why they sent this back to themselves from the future. Remember, these tablets come from the tablets of fire that was written by the original ones and sent back from the future. They're sending themselves this because here is why you have come amongst humanity. What would be the next step if they kept up this reducing humanity's DNA? I mean, it can't go much lower than to use animal DNA, because animals weren't created to be complex creatures and complex expression. They represent single facets that were embodied by the original ones. And we will look at their DNA progression, but let's not go there quite yet. If man's DNA had to be stepped down, the only place left would be the vegetable kingdom. And the vegetable kingdom is really not an option for humans. So some drastic action was needed. They had to come amongst humans, live like humans, not only pretend to be humans, but think they're humans. But at no time could they guide humans out of this mess if they were birthed to humans. Because to be birthed to humans, that's why I've told so many of you that you came through time tunnels at some point in your life. You created memories backwards to pretend you were born to a certain family. This has usually caused so much drama for people when I tell them that I've backed off telling them that since this is the day for shedding illusions, I can promise you that later generations were able to get original ones as parents, but you were not, because you weren't on Earth yet. There were only humans when most of you in class or listening to my voice were supposedly born. My loves, if you were born to your family like you think you were, you would now have animal DNA and be completely incapable of leading humanity anywhere. So what you did is you came with your advanced DNA, enabling advanced consciousness, and put memory implants in so you could have stability and a history of continuity. But you came, well, you can call it time tunnels, but the tunnels you came through, the time thing is very tricky, because even as I tell you, this was written from Althea by you in the future, but the future of Althea or the future of human time, you see, there may be timelessness on Althea. So to say these tablets come from the humans' timeline future is true but not true, because we don't really know how to gauge that when Althea has timelessness. Suffice it to say, you wrote these on Althea, and the tablets of fire is sent to you when you pretend to be one of the humans. Now, one thing that was really important is that A, you have the high consciousness, B, that you are guided to this path of the original one's information. This is not information we can give humanity. If you were human, you would have been out the door by now. This is your information. So, beloved ones, the reptilians that I spoke about are the reptilians that I recently explained have the mind control to make humans see them as they want to. They are in key positions in the media, in celebrities, especially celebrities that have a lot of fans. In celebrities include actors and actresses, and most of all in world leaders. Reptilians have infiltrated and they present themselves in human form. They don't change their form, they just change the way you see them. Now, it was necessary for them to also fool the original ones. Otherwise, your hidden identity would have been exposed too early for you to comprehend. So that is why you assumed the limitations of humanity and came in with to be one of them. You stayed under the radar and you changed the world by changing yourself. Believe me, the only reason humanity can be pulled up by grace into the God kingdom, even though it will take time for their human habits to wear off, is because you awakened to who you are. So let's take a look at wheel number 17, the wheel of losing reference points. This is very interesting. See how that little human figure clings to the pole? He is clinging to a reference point. Now it's interesting, the pictographs in these wheels are so primitively drawn, but this little figure conveys so much. You can feel his tension. You can literally feel his effort to move upwards, but the tension and the weight of his body pulling against this. So let's look at the first message this little glyph gives us of how humans have maintained their reference point. The pole represents density. You know, I have found people amongst people as in God beings amongst the original ones that fight and fight and fight and fight. Everything you say is opposition. To put themselves in conflict, they are putting themselves as an opposite. And this maintains the reference point of self as the center of your universe. It creates density, and density is used by them as their primary reference point. This dense body, that's my reference point. So if we look at the three sigils on the left, they're the three stages of change: transformation, transmutation, transfiguration. Those have been temporal, meaning related to time, reference points along the journey of eternity. So, during the stages of resurrection, which if man is going into the God kingdom, eventually, down the road, he will go into resurrection. It is extremely disorienting because then you deal with a fourth reference point, which is transcendence. And now what you are creating is a three-dimensional reality when you've been so used to going round and round on a flat surface. So you can see those big sigils at the top, and it looks like they're dissolving. those glyphs say reference points dissolve. And the glyphs to the right, see there's 4 little lines, glyphs to the right, says separation of self and the environment disappears. During resurrection, there are times you feel like you're losing your mind because it's like that reference point of the self as the pointer of your reality, the center of your reality, is just dissolving. So up until this point, which is sort of towards the end of resurrection stages, I have said that you dissolve your identity, but I've comforted those who are scared to do this by saying, but you retain self-awareness. Because loss of self-awareness feels like madness. And mind tells us that so that we can keep going back to mind's reference points out of fear. This fear is felt in the first stage of resurrection. Now, if you look at the frog means physical metamorphosis, and the little glyph below it says physical metamorphosis. There's a secret why physical metamorphosis is in this wheel regarding the dissolving of reference points. So, my loves, we spoke earlier about the third stage of resurrection creating a lot of physical ailments. A lot of physical problems happen, and that, like, these original ones are wondering, did I go backwards? Is this a descension? Why are there so many physical ailments? So this wheel has absolutely provided me with the answer. Remember, I have for many years explained that as you evolve in your awareness, if the body is not caught up, if it doesn't lose its toxins, etc., and I will tell you that by the third stage of resurrection, here's another illusion that has to go. Shedding illusions never easy, but it provides you with great power and energy. By the third level of resurrection, you have to get off all animal products. You have to become vegan. If you put the death programs of dead carcasses and the genetic program of these animals that are so terribly disrespected and misused is in their products like milk and cheese and eggs. If you still put that in your body by resurrection, level 3, your body will lag behind your awareness. And for your own sake, you won't make that big evolutionary leap into the white light. This will manifest as severe arthritis types pain, rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatism, and joints that don't move properly. But this wheel has taught me something I didn't realize. That if the body goes through metamorphosis, because as a group we are pulling each other up into higher stages, because of our dedication to this journey. When I get insights, I get higher energy and power, to use this word. All of you do, because we're like the mountain climbers connected by a rope. So if one of you gets something, it's easier for all the others to get it. So your body might be pulled into these stages of metamorphosis. But conversely to what we just said, if the awareness lags behind, your body is going to do what it does best. It's going to signal you through the language of pain. It seems so unfair. You've come such a long way only to be subject to your body's aches and pains. Why is this unfair signaling happening? Because when you make the transition to go into the white light reality, you will find that you and your body are no longer separate. You become the body. The body becomes you. Beloved one, the body has to be ready and the awareness has to be ready. So body is prompting you every little misstep. It immediately registers as an ache or a pain. And one would think you've done so much recapitulation, learning from painful signals over this long journey. Why should it still be here? Because the body yearns to progress further. And if the awareness is keeping it behind, it's going to speak up. Now, there is another. I have to do this rather quickly because I want to cover the 18th wheel. You already know most of it, but excuse me 1 second. There's somebody speaking to me, so just 1 second. It says, Iyach ku nahache hechapa kunas, evistahu ashte, michta unevevishva sebech yanuchkava. This is the language that you speak in Altea. This is the language that the tablets of fire are written in. That's why I know they were written in Altea. It says there's another lesson you haven't learned. Aha! I see what it is. The dissolving of reference points. Why is it saying to us that we're going to pull humans into metamorphosing their bodies? But because of fear of reference points, that will hold their awareness back, and so there will be a great increase in illness on the earth. So that is why the tablets of the divine heritage that I spoke to you about, that are preceding these 18 wheels, creates an infrastructure. They are attitudes. Each one of them is an attitude. I just yesterday asked Rogier, because all of this is coming out on New Year's Eve in the Book of High Magic, and 84 principles with their glyphs and wheels. Those are for us, for the white light reality. But the wheels that are the 26 tablets of the divine heritage, true, it's a guidance for us, but they are the infrastructure for resurrection, and these attitudes provide a non-linear, so it doesn't hold them back, reference points for them. That will be effortlessly in the human consciousness. And this will help them not fear, so that their awareness can develop along with the metamorphosis of their body, so they don't all get very sick. So the next wheel is wheel 18, the pivotal role of man. So the glyphs that are from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, from the third creation of man, all other star races came. This is interesting because one of the things despised of man by the reptilians in their arrogance is how man worships all the hostile, evilly intended star races that come here just because they're star races. When I was with Sergei in Siberia, I did, it was a very small private retreat, and I did personal healings on everyone there, but we didn't have a proper massage table or anything for me to work on. And so we put them on a bed, and so I don't have to bend right over, because you want to keep your spine straight when you're doing healings. I had to crawl around on my knees around the bed to do their healings. And I said to Sergei, there's something wrong with this picture. And Sergei said, yes, I know. So this is like man worshipping these star races and channeling the star beings and things, when man is the parent and the star races are much later creations as their next generation. And so the reptilians in the crust found them to be completely idiotic, be revering these beings that want the earth and want them off. So, the footprints. Footprints like that in glyphs means influence. Man's influence as root race is felt throughout the cosmos. Cosmic races, unless they choose to be formless, like I've spoken about the wise ones being like big shaped orange balls, when they have form, they are bipedal. They have 2 legs and 2 arms and a head. They often have no genitals because they were genetically engineered as clones. Cloning weakens and destroys a race. And they often have fewer fingers, but in general terms, they look in the shape of a man. And I mean, if you consider how they would have been the result of genetic evolution on this planet, how would they all end up like that? That's because of man's genetic influence in that 3rd level of humanity. And the glyphs, 11 o'clock, the top one says, God influenced first creation of man. At the 10 o'clock level, it says, God influenced creation of man, second creation. God influenced second creation of man. And then the 8 o'clock sigil says, God influenced third creation of man. Now, at that glyph just to the right of the bird, it's saying that animals contributed to the 5th one of man, the 5th creation of man. Animals contributed to the 5th creation of man. Now, interesting, you see that the bird is depicted in a night scene. If you read that whole little section, you would say animals contributed to the 5th creation of man, and the night of man began, the time of soul sleep, or the dark night of man. And the 5th one says what you already know, that from the 4th creation of man was created by star races and animals. So that whole symbol of the little lines in the little circle, half black, half white, and see the footprints go right across it. It is saying that man not only influenced, created life in this universe, but in the black light universe, which is the black light universe is a parallel universe. By the way, when the universe goes into its stage of resurrection, it will be, I believe, the 2nd stage of resurrection. And the black light universe will no longer exist as a separate universe. Soul as a separate entity no longer exists. The soul aspect within incorruptible matter is emphasized within matter itself. It's not a separate reality. So, beloved ones, a very quick little thing that we missed because we're complete with this information now. So I know I'm past the time, but if I could just take another 2 minutes and fill in a little gap that I omitted. One of the wheels previously said that animals came before man, but they did not come before the original ones in the hierarchy of the order how races were created. So the question is, where did animals come from? Did the original ones also create the animals? And the answer is no. The infinite created the original ones, not by laboratories, by manifesting them. First, the building blocks that they were created of which is not light and love. It's not light and love. It was not split yet. So the original ones were created from different subatomic particles, but you can't even call them atomic. They're from different building blocks of life than everything was created once it's in duality. The infinite manifested those building blocks and then manifested them into the original ones. So the infinite did the same for animals. The animals didn't genetically come from the original ones, but in one way they did. The animals, as I said, referred to briefly earlier, represent aspects found within this first creation, which is the original ones. They were created non-genetically to represent this. For instance, we had a tiger earlier on. The tiger represents the strength and power of the original one. That is an aspect that is found in an animal, but it is not genetically engineered from the God beings. Now, did the animals participate in this fall? Absolutely. Between the time of the original ones, which dwelled, by the way, on earth at that time, and the first creation of man, the animals were manifested by the infinite. So the animals at that time were fully able to telepathically communicate. Fully telepathic, and you were speaking to the animals, but without sound, and they were very, very much more conscious. As life fell, so did they, to make them what they are today. You remember that mouse that was up in the corner of the one wheel? And it said, there's a secret? The secret is that man has to understand that he isn't the oldest race. The animals preceded him. And he can have so much more respect. The way animals for food are treated is beyond savage. And that's because humanity is animal itself. But it is in observing this that most, not all, but most star races think of man as no more than flies. Because if they were advanced beings, they wouldn't be doing this, and they wouldn't be trashing their own beautiful home. That's their reasoning, why they look down on man. So, my dearest ones, I would like to close with prayer. It is with the deepest gratitude that we receive so much of the perception of the continuity of life as we know it. Within the white light reality, as we move ahead, we are in a place of no known reference points. But in gratitude, we receive these principles of high magic to provide an infrastructure that we might transition with grace, and that we may in all ways feel as supported in our inner space as in our outer space, which combines as one. We are grateful for this assistance, and we dedicate our lives to all that we are capable of becoming. Amen.